The United States dollar will crash when this black line starts to go down. I'm going to explain why in one simple, fast step using this one chart. This is going to absolutely blow your mind. But before we get into this chart that explains everything, let's define what I'm talking about when I say the United States dollar will crash. I'm not saying this is when it will lose its reserve currency status. I'm saying it's when it will go back down to the lows we saw in 2008, roughly around 70 or 75 on the DXY. That would be a decline of over 30%. Let's start by going all the way back to 2000, and this chart goes to December of 2022. On the left, we go from 30% to 50%. This is a chart from the BIS, the Bank of International Settlements, and it shows us how much dollar-denominated debt is outside of the United States that went to non-bank entities. So let's just assume a sovereign wealth fund, a corporation, a hedge fund, something that's a non-bank that's getting a dollar-denominated loan that's outside of the United States. All right, and that's what's represented by this black line. So we go back to 2000 and we're about 47%. We go up over 50% in 2002, but then we come crashing down to the GFC, and then it spikes up, goes back down, and then we go into this longer term trend all the way up to where we are today. All right, now let's go over this blue line. This is actually the bonds that were issued by the non-bank entities. So obviously that's a form of debt. And editor, go ahead and throw up the main chart just as a reference point. And you can see we also have the bank lending represented by the red line. I just didn't want to include that red line here because I wanted to keep it nice and clean and organized. All right, so this blue line really goes up, goes parabolic before the GFC, and then it actually dips down. So that would mean that the dollar debt overall went down, but the percentage of dollar debt starts to go back up. It's very key. We'll go over that in just a moment. But then it dips down again when we have another kind of financial crisis. This was the European debt crisis. And then it goes down again with the cerveza sickness. And what is it doing today? It's going down again. So notice every single time that the amount of dollar-denominated debt goes down, sometimes the percentage goes up, but it almost always tells us that we are in a global economic downturn. The only question is, does that downturn include the United States? And I know many of you right now are saying to yourself, okay, George, I know that you are a fantastic artist, but what does this red dot and line and triangle thingy represent? Well, that just shows us that each one of these arrows point to that downturn in overall debt that represents a huge economic red flag. So let's move on to the green dot, which shows us big moves in the United States dollar. So right here, the United States dollar started to plummet. Editor, go ahead and throw up a chart of the DXY. And we can see around 2002, when the dollar-denominated debt started to go down, the United States dollar went down as well. In fact, the way I see it is the decline in debt kind of confirmed that the down move in the dollar wasn't short-term, but it was a long-term trend that, as we know, went all the way down to 2008 before it swung back the other way. And I think the catalyst to the dollar gaining strength and the dollar debt as a percentage of overall global debt going up was the GFC. More on that in just a moment. But right here, the dollar went down again, call it 2010, but then we had another, call it financial crisis, the European debt crisis, and then the dollar debt started to go back up as far as a percentage, and that kind of pulled the dollar up with it. And then we see the same thing happen in 2016 without a global economic decline. So what's interesting is now, as we speak, the dollar on the DXY is starting to go down again. But the move has not been confirmed by the percentage of dollar-denominated debt. It is still going up. And what's fascinating is right here, we're in another down move in overall bonds and down move in the extension of bank credit to the non-bank entities represented by that red line that would lead us to believe there's a very high probability that we are going into another global economic downturn. The question becomes, does that include the United States? If the answer is yes, then this black line will most likely start to go back up, which, if history is a guide, this would suggest this down move in the United States dollar that we've seen lately is only temporary. But, like I said at the beginning of this video, if this black line that represents global dollar-denominated debt outside the U.S. to the non-banks starts to go back down, then this would indicate, in my opinion, that it's confirming the most recent down move in the dollar, and therefore it isn't a short-term move, but a long-term move like we saw from 2002 all the way down to 2008, where the dollar went from 118 on the DXY all the way down to the low 70s. So quick review to make sure we're all on the same page. When the debt percentage goes down or up along with the DXY, it usually confirms the trend. Said another way, when this black line follows the DXY, that means the DXY will most likely continue on its current trajectory. We saw this in 2002, 2008, but when the DXY went down in 2016, we saw that the black line didn't go down. It kept going up. So then the dollar followed suit and reversed its short-term trend. And we also know that when there's a global economic problem, usually the percentage of dollar debt goes up. In other words, that little black line. So if that black line goes up this time as a result of this global economic downturn, that would invalidate the most recent down move in the dollar. But if this black line starts to go down again, that would confirm the down move, which would most likely take it into another long-term trend all the way back down to 70 and maybe even lower. So the moral of the story is to know when the United States dollar will crash, or if it will crash in the near term. You got to pay attention to that little black line. For more content that'll help you build wealth and thrive in a world of out-of-control central banks and big governments, check out this playlist right here. I will see you on the next video.